to go.
All right, it's 6:01. Let's go ahead and gavel in. Call to order. First order of business, Pledge of Allegiance.
Pete. Pete.
Oh, yes, please. Thank you.
¿Alguien va a necesitar interpretación? Okay, you're good to go, Nancy.
Okay, thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next up is approval of agenda.
Chairman, I have a couple of changes I'd like to make to the agenda motion. I move that we remove items J1 and 2 from tonight's agenda.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Its second motion, Mr. Chairman, I would like to add recognition of Joanne Alfred to the agenda.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. All right, next up, Mr. Superintendent, comments from the public.
I
We
think
have
we
zero.
need to adopt the agenda as changed.
Okay, the approval of the agenda is changed. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? I understand there were no comments from the public this week, Chris, is that correct? Okay,
No comments submitted
submitted.
for the
Good,
record.
good point. That's a very valid point. Okay, next up, board business, Women's History Month proclamation. Proclamation recognizing Women's History Month. Greater Albany Public Schools Board of Education, proclamation number 2022/23, TAC 10. Whereas women of every race, class, and ethnic background have made historic contributions to the growth and strength of our country in countless recorded and unrecorded ways. Whereas women have played and continue to play critical economic, cultural, and social role in every sphere of life of the nation by constituting a significant portion of the labor force working inside and outside of the home. Whereas women have played a unique role throughout the history of the nation by providing the majority of volunteer labor force of the country. Whereas women were particularly important in the establishment of early charitable, philanthropic, and cultural institutions in our country. Whereas women of every race, class, and ethnic background served as early leaders in the forefront of every major progressive social change movement. Whereas women have served our country courageously in the military. Whereas women have been leaders not only in securing their own rights of suffrage and equal opportunity, but also the abolition movement, the emancipation movement, the industrial labor movement, the civil rights movement, and other movements, especially the peace movement, which create a more fair and just society for all. Whereas despite these contributions, the role in women in history has been consistently overlooked and underappreciated in the literature, teaching, and study of American history. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Greater Albany Public School Board of Education proclaim March 2023 as Women's History Month, adopted this 27th day of February, signed by myself and our Superintendent, Andy Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Albany Public Schools Foundation recognition. Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I have Madison and Ms. Joanne to the podium, please? And while you're making your way up there, I'd like to read a statement. Joanne started teaching math at West Albany High School in the early 1980s, at the time where she did not even have her own classroom. In fact, her desk is a cart around the building to available rooms. She made sure that the students learned. For her entire career, Joanne taught all levels of math, fulfilled many leadership roles, and led by example with a profound love for education and students. Throughout the time as an educator at West Albany High School, she was seen by her teaching peers as strong and a team member who led and was always willing to take the hard tasks. Joanne continues to be an incredible asset at the Albany Public School Foundation, and our students throughout her continued service with the Albany Public School Foundation, where she has served on the board of directors for many years as committee chair for numerous programs, initiatives. Joanne is a true champion for Greater Albany Public Schools, students, teachers, and works hard to ensure that they have access to critical resources that they help ensure their success. And if the board would join me up here, we can take a picture with Miss Joanne.
That's very good.
Good luck getting her in there.
Thank you. Nice front and center.
Okay, next up, superintendent's comments. Superintendent Gardner.
So I'll keep it pretty short tonight. We have several presentations on the agenda. Last week, the quarterly revenue forecast from the state came out, and it continues to show the economy doing better than expected and revenue being collected above what the state predicted. It is good news that the economy is healthy. It tends to minimize the risk of a soft or hard recession. The risks of that in the short term seem to have diminished. And that helps the prediction for the next 2 years because the economy is looking to be trending a little bit better. The state's kicker refund to taxpayers has grown just this quarter from $3.6 billion to $3.9 billion. And so some of the gains that the economy is making are simply only going to return to taxpayers in the kicker because it's more than we expected to bring in. And so that will continue to leave revenue somewhat flat in this next biennium. What we intend to do, hoping to get this done by the 13th, 14th, 15th of March, is come back at the next board meeting and share with you what that revenue looks like for us and what our program looks like, and then how we're going to go through the next month and a half beyond that, balancing the budget, right? So that is really the next process. Get all of our costs, figure them out, figure out what we're gonna have for money, and then move forward. It is complicated, as I wrote to you all about, or made more complicated by the fact that we don't know what the state's budget will end up at. And it is further complicated by the fact that we don't yet have the audit. I think we're working towards getting that done as well here, hopefully in the short term. So that is a little frustrating, and we'll continue to work on that. I believe we're ready with our accounts to do it. And so, yay, but we're not quite there yet. So it's a matter of getting some people down here for about 4 or 5 days so we can conduct that. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Okay, board reports. Michael, do you have anything?
Yeah, a couple weeks ago, student board member Huzeska gave one of the most interesting comments or updates I've ever heard, and that was her philosophy club. And so last week I made a request, and I stopped in and watched them in action. And I found it very interesting. I think their format of discussion, they have a common reading they're supposed to be doing. It's common topic, and it looks like it's selected current topics, which I think helps their discussion. But they come prepared, and they kind of do seminar, which is kind of a third or fourth year type of thing you do in college, cross-talking amongst each other. So just a shout out to the Philosophy Club and shout out to the teacher, Jordan Rupert, who leads them. So that was great. My second is a request, and I think the other board members will, I don't know, I shouldn't assume, but this is a follow-up to the Meadow Ridge letter we got a couple weeks ago. And my request, I think we are legally okay to do some type of notification to the non-disruptive parents and guardians when a so-called classroom clear occurs. And my request, if maybe I'm stepping out of bounds here, would be to kind of work on a process to do that. I think parents, it happened, and I understand the folks at Middle Ridge should understand that it happens at every school, more or less. It happened to my child, and I didn't really know the extent of it until years later. The first grade teacher told me, hey, by the way, they came out a bunch of times. And I don't think we're expecting like every single time. I realize sometimes maybe you go down to the library 10 minutes earlier than you would have, or something like that. But I think when it's a significant time, and I'll let you decide what that is, I think the parents of the non-disruptive children should be notified in some fashion. So that's my message to you, Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you.
Clarification, what about the disruptive children? Their parents get notified too?
Well, I'm assuming that it's part, that they get, if they didn't, they should absolutely. I'm assuming they do in the process when they talk about, what's going on with your kid. I think many of these children are on IEPs, and that probably gets talked about then. So I made some assumptions, without a doubt, the disruptive child, but I don't think that's the issue. I think the parents find out through conversation later, or maybe never find out. And I think legally, as long as we can't point fingers, we can't talk about there's privacy laws. We can't do that, we can't violate that, but just kind of in general, that, hey, you missed X amount of time.
So just as, it's not my turn, but
Yeah, go ahead.
We recognize you. Go ahead, Roger.
Do we not have a policy now, and are we not following that?
Would you like me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Superintendent Gardner asked me to speak to this. So a few things that I would want to note. First, when there is a room clear, the student who is either left in the room with staff or is being escorted from the room, their parents are always notified. Oftentimes, it's part of a behavior plan. We call those in this district a 5-point plan. Depending on the nature of the incident, parents might receive a letter or a parent squared message, and sometimes they don't. There are instances where a room is cleared that children would never know that is what's happening. So for instance, it's elementary school. I have a student who I can see is escalating, and it's about 5 minutes before we're supposed to go to library. So instead of saying, oh, everybody get up, we're gonna clear a room, it sounds like, you know what, it's time for library. So boys and girls, get your library books, we're gonna line up, right? Because we're gonna make that transition early. So there are lots of times that happens that wouldn't be immediately obvious to a student. There are certainly times that it happens where it is. There's an escalation and things in the room are disrupted, other people's things, the teacher's things. And in those instances, certainly having a communication that says, hey, we had a rough day today in class. Your child might wanna talk about it, might wanna process kind of what happened. Please be aware. This is what happened, and here are some helpful ways to speak to your child about it. Those are always things that are best practice. But I would delineate the difference because it wouldn't necessarily be that every single time there is a quote unquote room clear that either parents would be notified in the class or even that someone would know that that's what happened. And certainly there are times where it's quite obvious.
Thank you for that clarification.
If I might follow up. So that makes sense. I guess my question would be is that in writing somewhere? The presentation you just, or the response you just gave?
Just in terms of that, I think that there is probably something, certainly within that plan to the student, but I don't know that we have a general policy and we can work on putting something together that would. But I think, what Assistant Superintendent Harlan said is very, there would be a graduated scale for what we would communicate about, because elementary teachers can be very smooth in their responses to those things and protect the dignity of the student and and disruption to the day. So we can work on that.
Thanks.
I would just say is, I have a sophomore and an eighth grader in school, and over the last few years, I certainly didn't hear about it from teachers. I hear about it from my daughter. So I do agree with Michael on the idea that we need to figure out a better program that if your kid's coming home and, saying, hey, our whole class got cleared, Mom, what do you think about that? That should not be the first time Mom hears about it. So I think we do have some work to do there. Eric, you have anything?
Sure. So I was a little saddened this morning. I woke up to a text that said that the speaker for the Black History Month presentation at South this morning was sick. So hopefully we can reschedule that and get that going again. I met with ODE last week, and I'm sorry, not ODE, OSBA last week, and we worked on some things and some projects that are going really well. And then I would have to concur with Director Thompson. I've been lucky. I have a fifth grader that has never been, they've had to take out of the room or have the room evacuated. But he does know all of the class drama and the class gossip. We can address those as parents, but I don't have training how to talk to my fifth grader on maybe a traumatic event that happened that day at school. So it'd be nice to be able to have a YouTube video or something that we can push to address some of those things. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Roger, you have anything?
If you want to go out, it doesn't matter. All right, Michael, I just want to say, excellent suggestion, really, really well thought out, and I think it's something we should try to make happen. And if COVID taught us anything, it's that we need to know what's going on in the classrooms, and the parents need to be involved in that. So I think that's, when it's significant, when the children are affected, then I believe that should be a really good time to let the parents know what's going on. So that's all I had.
So I just, I want to clarify Superintendent Gardner's comments in the way of state funding and budgeting and knowing what we're getting. I think that there's some agreement in Salem that it's 9.3 is the number.
9.
It's 9.9, I'll ask again. So,
Last time on 9.3.
So, based on that, our revenue projections should not be, they should be fairly precise, right? They should be much better than a speculative, we don't know what the legislature is going to do, like many times you find yourself in this time of the year. There's more certainty to it, and so on the revenue side, we should be able to go forward with confidence?
So I'll talk to you just a little bit. Each year, or each 2 years in a biennium, we get a number. So the biennium we are in, 2021 to 23, we got 9.3. That number, though, was not given to us 50-50 in each year. It was given to us 49-51. The state then sets a new number, and they go back and calculate what half of 9.3 was, even though we are living this year on 51%. And so then they move it back to 50%, and then they calculate off of that. Our current service level is not this year, it is halfway between this year and last year. So it ends up being a little different, and also enrollment impacts that. And so when we look at the numbers, it's 9.3 to 9.9 is 6%, or a little bit over. We do not see a 6% increase in revenue because of some of those computation challenges.
Okay, so whatever the number is, it's just math at this point. If the state is, the legislature and the governor's office have set that number, right? And so.
You want to know tonight?
No,
what we
no,
have?
no, just budget process going forward. On the revenue side, we should be able to get fairly certain as to where we'll be.
I don't believe that's the big issue. I believe the big issue will be taking the costs that we need to fit into the budget and putting together a really good plan to make it fit. I think we have an idea of where we're going to be revenue-wise.
Right, developing a budget around that number is a different exercise, but
I say that's
Many-
90% of the exercise is that.
thank you.
One more thing.
Sure.
Can we-
Eric, you're up.
Thank you, sir. This afternoon, I received a phone call from a very high-ranking person in our district concerned about behavior. And they had a staff member, their life was threatened by a student. And, safety has to be our number one priority for our students and our staff, even before educational value. I don't know what we need to do as a board to support the safety and staff. Our staff can't be afraid to come to work. And unfortunately, this is not the first time, and this rapid succession of violence to our staff really needs to be addressed as soon as possible, and some actions taken, because we will lose staff and lose education to our students in these issues. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Anyone else? Okay, I'd like to talk to a couple things. I agree with Eric. Behaviors are key. You know, we certainly, you talk to the staff that are in the schools. We've definitely made improvement from the first year back from COVID, but we're not all the way back to where we need to be, you know, and so they're seeing light at the end of the tunnel, and that's exciting, but they also need the tools to help them get positive behavior from our students. And when we have children that are doing things they shouldn't, we need to be able to deal with that. You know, that's part of being a young person, right? I'd like to give a compliment to Memorial Middle School on bringing back a tool to help them help kids make better decisions. They brought back Saturday School. I would like to talk a little bit about middle school sports and activities. The last couple of years, we have tried to reinvigorate middle school activities, sports. You know, I'm a product of this district. You know, back when I was here, we had sports in the middle school. You know, I think it's important to give kids 6th to 8th grade a little bit of ability to vent and have some camaraderie, and also maybe have some adult leadership to help them mature. So we're trying to bring that back, and we've put some funding to that in the amount of $50K a year per school. We're not quite as far along in the project of getting that money utilized and having those programs in existence for our children as we'd like, but it is something that we feel is important, and we're moving forward in the right direction. I'd also like to say thank you, and I'm blanking and I forget her name, first name Kate. I believe she's the parent, the teacher's president there at Oak School. Jana Pierce came and made a presentation last board meeting about their school, and it was really great. And at the end of that, I actually got an invite to come to their game night, or game show night, they called it. They did a great job. It was really fun. I mean, they had probably 70, 80, you know, kids and parents and stuff. And this guy came up, I think he's either the vice president or the dean of students, and he was great with the mic, and the kids were having a great time, and they were kind of doing these truths or, you know, dares, and it was really a neat family atmosphere, and it was very nice to get to see them all having fun and smiling and having a good time at the school. So hats off to everybody at Oak. Great job. Thank you for the hard work you do and the energy you put into it. Really, it makes you smile. And, you know, I only speak for myself, but this volunteer job we're up here for, a lot of it is grind and ugly, but those kind of things make you smile and just feel it's all worthwhile. So, okay, I will defer to our student board members, and I will let them determine who goes first, because when I pick, it seems like I picked the wrong one. As demonstrated, they can't even pick who's up.
Start today then. We had a percussion show this Saturday on the 25th. Ms. Paningua put together an amazing percussion show, and it's one of the premier percussion shows in the state. Gathering of the Champions Awards nights happened in the last week or so, and Ms. Ayers put this together to honor our students. We had a great turnout for both nights with dozens of students from all grades, sophomores, seniors, juniors, freshmen, getting rewards and recognition for their hard work, including not only 4.0 GPAs, but also different areas of character and behavior. For club updates, Key Club is currently working on a hygiene drive, ABC House, and they're hoping to have it from March 8th on going into March 22nd. Sayas finished this year's major projects with finishing a planting along the creek side of Periwinkle Park, which is a 3-year process they've been working on from the dam to where the creek turns the corner. And they had their equity panel of all South staff and talked about ways to better behavior and connections among students and staff and equality over at South Albany. Moving on, they plan to work on more recreational work with hikes planned for Earth Day and potential beach trip. And they're wondering if the school board could help in any way. They're trying to figure out if we could potentially get solar panels over at South Albany. FCCLA is preparing for their state competition March 16th to 18th, and they're also planning to make St. Patrick's Day treats coming up for St. Patrick's Day and a potential movie night someday in late April. All tentative for now. Book Club is nearing 70 members and going strong. The Drama Club has some performers going to state April 13th to 15th. They also have community showings, which are to be determined, and Plot Like the Gravy Thickens auditions March 6th through 8th. Artists Unite and Art Club are coming together and planning to join into one art club, as currently we have 2, and planning to combine to work on more bigger projects with their joint members. Leadership in ASB met with clubs to contribute to make a joint club poster encouraging students to get involved, where all the information about different extracurriculars on campus can be viewed on a singular poster to kind of streamline the process. They're also working on formalizing student government officer roles and are currently frustrated by the district's finance system. Leadership is also working on March Madness competitions with 3v3 competitions happening in March. Also planning prom, book drive, blood drive, powder puff, matcha volleyball, and more projects for late March and early April. The Sadie Hawking Sweetheart Dance also went well last couple of Saturdays ago, February 18th. The RISE program is looking into potentially restarting a student store, and ASB is also trying to help out with that where they can. For sports, track and field had their first official practice today, and the team helped to set up equipment as well as build group camaraderie and get the team to know each other's names, as we have a lot of new faces this year. Tennis, softball, and baseball are also starting to practice soon with tryouts and similar stuff happening this week. Basketball, boys and girls play against Lebanon tomorrow, and boys and girls basketball teams both won against Woodburn and Corvallis from freshman through varsity teams, and both programs are set up to hopefully make it to the playoffs. Library continues with guest speakers, this time focused on speakers for Black History Month. As was mentioned, our speaker for the day did get canceled, but we're looking into rescheduling for next month for Women's History Month. Tomorrow, we're planning to have Mayor Johnson come in during our 5th period and be another guest speaker. The spring band concert is happening at the Albany Performing Arts Center this February 28th at 7 p.m., also tomorrow. And the spring choir concert is also happening at the Albany Performing Arts Center, 7 p.m. on March 9th. The Pride team is also getting together to plan their 2nd annual Pride Week, Pride Spirit Week, with another meeting tomorrow during lunch to represent the Pride acronym we have here, which highlights the behavioral expectations and the qualities we try to exhibit over at South Albany. With perseverance, respect, integrity, discipline, excellence. And that is all.
Awesome. After the West versus South game on January 16th, West held the Blacklight Dance. I heard it was very lit. Thank you. The Environmental Club recently had a campus cleanup day, and Philosophy Club also recently hosted Director Thompson at their last meeting. They discussed a moral dilemma related to the drinking age, the difference between 18 and 21. It was actually quite interesting. Pokemon Club is up and running, which I've never played Pokemon, but I might have to start. Our wrestling teams went to state this weekend. Major credit to two-time state champion Ariana Martinez, who was also West's first ever women's state champion, bringing home gold again. The girls' basketball team held their last home game on Friday, which was also their senior night. The team was able to celebrate the only senior in the program, Julianne Pope, and I don't think it's often you have a single senior on a large team. Girls also have their last game of the season tomorrow at McKay. Boys basketball last game will be tomorrow at home on West Court, as well as senior night for the boys and the High Steppers. The Youth and Government delegation, the West Albany delegation for Youth and Government went to Salem for 3 days, last Thursday through Saturday, to participate in the state Youth and Government Conference. Faced a little delay due to the weather, but the itinerary shifted. This was at Willamette University because the Capitol is under extreme remodel, so much so that even Governor Kotek can't get to her office. On Thursday, students split into 4 committee sessions to practice parliamentary procedure and revise bills they had written. On Friday, delegates separated into the House and Senate and began the legislative process. Huge shout out to Mr. Wadlow, the YAG advisor, and West Albany's delegation and club president, Senior Caroline Gow. Caroline served as the youth governor last year, and she passed the baton on to Kylie Johnson from the Sherwood delegation, I believe. Also big shout out to Marissa Fink, the director of Youth and Government, for organizing this. There was the Polar Plunge on February 18th to raise awareness for the Special Olympics of Oregon. Band and choir had a solo and ensemble districts on Saturday. Madison Shipley, Mason Chambers, Gabe Buchanan, the brass quintet, and the saxophone quintet all qualified for state. West Albany High Steppers had a competition this Saturday, placing 3rd in traditional and 2nd in hip hop. Some spring sports have begun. Golf and softball have begun a few practices, I believe. I know that golf was out swinging today on the course. Lacrosse has had optional practices for a while and is now picking up, reaching the beginning of their season. Also recently, Kelsey Nava Costales has been hired and will be at West on Tuesdays and Fridays, also at Memorial and NAMS. She came in recently to a Latinx club at West and will be in schools as an advisor with a focus on the Latino and Indigenous students and families in the school. Big thanks to Mrs. Mel for advising the Latinx club. Also, one thing I've noticed at West this month has been the student-made artwork and info pics celebrating Black History this month. And on Thursday, March 2nd, West will hold a blood drive in the auxiliary gym.
Thank you very much. Okay, next up, Committee, Community, and School Presentation, School Report, Oak Grove. Andy.
Mr. Chairman, it is my pleasure to introduce Oak Grove Principal Sue Turner, and it looks like she is accompanied by a large number of her staff. So welcome, everybody.
We see some shirts.
All right. I'm going to share my screen. Perfect. Well, thank you all for inviting me here to share a little bit more about our amazing elementary school. Get my little cursor down here. I'm going to share with you some quick facts about Oak Grove, the first of which is that I have been Oak Grove's principal for just over a year. So a year ago, December, was my first month with them, and I'm proud to share the following information. We are a school of about 339 students. We're the 5th largest elementary school in GAPS. We have 42 staff members, 15 classroom teachers, resource teacher, SSE teacher. We do have a full-time PE teacher, 0.6 music, and we also house the K-2 Structured Support Special Program for the district, referred to as the SSC. We have a half-time dean of students and a half-time counselor. We're 12% free and reduced lunch, and 11.6% of our students receive special education services. And I'm very proud of our attendance rate. We are, at the latest data that was shared out, we are at a 92% attendance rate, which currently is the highest attendance rate for elementary schools. Our mission at Oak Grove is to create a place where everyone can feel welcomed, valued, challenged to achieve personal and academic excellence. And I like to say every Monday in my Monday morning announcements, it's a great day to be a Mustang. So go Mustangs. I wanted to share a little bit about our approach at Oak Grove and how it aligns with GAP's strategic plan. For equitable outcomes for all students, we have a multi-tiered system of support for struggling students. We go through an individual problem-solving process, and we have an instructional leadership team, many of which have joined me tonight. Social and emotional mental health support. We have a foundations team that works to help all students at our school. So we have a very large, what we call green zone, which are the kids that are coming to school. They're excited to be there, and we want to keep it that way. So we make sure that we have a lot of incentives and activities that make school fun. We have an amazing dean of students who is only with us half-time, behavior coach, and a half-time counselor. And we have regular SEL lessons within the classroom, but also we have SEL groups, and SEL referring to social and emotional learning. Academics-wise, we participate with edX coaches. I personally have an edX coach, which is great as a new principal. It helps me to feel supportive and helps me ask a lot of questions and to know what I'm to be doing. We have PLC teams and regular meetings and curriculum mapping, which is provided for all schools in the district. And we have a wonderful instructional coach who is there to support our academics. All right, some points of pride that I really am excited to share with you. First of all, the reason why we're all there, our incredible students, amazing students. We have very active and supportive PTC. Our parent club is very supportive. As a matter of fact, they were just out today. They would like to invest in an expansion of our playground equipment. And they came out, Gary Dahlquist came out and met with our PTC and working together to help provide a little bit more for our students. We have one of the most experienced and dedicated elementary school staff members. It's been wonderful for me as a new principal to come in and have such high experience and staff members clearly that are dedicated. They came out here tonight, and we have another event, community event on Thursday night. So it means a lot to me that they would be here. We have foundations and PBIS team. Again, that's supporting all of our students. And Mileage Club happens, that's all parent run. That happens twice a week on our track, where during the lunch recess, kids can run and earn some little tokens and charms and certificates and awards. And I am working towards a marathon this year. And so I get out there and I'd love to say I run the track. I'm still walking. I walk the track. So we'll get there. We'll get there. We are one of a few schools that participates in the Oregon Battle of the Books. And that's coming up. We're pretty excited on Saturday. We're doing, is it regional? Yeah, Saturday. And I'm excited for that we're taking a team to compete in that. We host orchestra and band. And we have brought back this year monthly family events, community events, so that families come out. And so far they have been absolutely well received. We have filled our cafeteria for movie night, bingo night, trivia night was just this last week or last month, I should say. We're almost into March. So it's been really fun to bring back some of our rich traditions and celebrations. Some other points of pride. I'd like to share with you a little bit about the data that we use and we look at several times throughout the year. And that is to inform everything we do, from instruction to our social emotional groups, to our attendance initiatives and things that we do to motivate kids to want to be at school. And so some of the things that we look at multiple times a year are Acadians, reading data, DESA, which is a social emotional measure. Easy CBM is what the district uses for math. And then we look at SWIS, which is behavioral referrals. And so I brought just some samples along to show you. This would be an example of some of the things that our Acadians assessment tool measures. It looks at all of the various skills that are required for students to become readers and to maintain being strong readers. And so it will look at phoneme segmentation, correct letter sounds, their reading fluency, their accuracy, and correct words read are some of the items that are measured with this particular assessment tool. And then I referred to earlier, the DESA report shows the percentage of students that are either typical, strong, or in need of instruction in 8 areas of social emotional development. And so that's something that we look at. That is new to us this year, so we're still learning how to use that tool, but we use that to inform us of what students might benefit from a social emotional learning group. And then the Easy CBM, as I said before, is it just keeps an eye on if students are at risk, if they need extra math instruction and intervention. And, you know, for example, if you look at the far left, that's the kindergarten fall to winter, you can see the difference between the red in there, those are students at risk, and then in the winter and how much that has gone down. So that just gives you an example of how we can look at that and say, what we're doing is effective, it is helping students to grow. So I know part of this presentation is to share with you some of the challenges that we experience at Oak Grove. And I think it's really important to mention that we have a lot of positives to share at Oak Grove, but every school has their specific challenges. And just because they look different from what might be being experienced at another school, we too have things that we are working to improve. One of the things that I would like to see, it's a personal goal of mine to make sure that it happens, is for the size of our school. We are a large school and we do have a specialized behavior program. And currently we are staffed with only a half-time dean and half-time counselor, and that is creating a huge challenge. So oftentimes when I don't have a dean or counselor in the building, then I have to put aside my job and step in and do the job that they would be doing if they were present. And so obviously that, you know, creates a void and a gap. Also then in rigorous and engaging academics, I know you all have heard this, but I want to share that at Oak Grove too, we share that this substitute shortage means that we don't always have the staff available to provide kids with those small groups and interventions and the extra attention that kids who are trying to catch up and try to make those gains, we're not always fully staffed for that. And then in terms of equitable outcomes, I think one of our largest challenges has been providing for the extensive mental health needs of students in order for them to be able to access their education. And we are so knowledgeable and well-trained and experienced in education. What we don't have is that same knowledge, experience, and education in mental health care. And so that is something that I think is plaguing all districts, and not just statewide, I think everywhere. But we do feel it. And I think that's one thing that mental health concerns, they are a concern across all socioeconomic, every school is experiencing that. And so that is one of our challenges. Right, so I was asked, what are we looking forward to? What's coming up? And I want to share with you, this is a picture of Fern, and Fern is currently 3, and she's going to be joining us in 2 years. And Fern is confined to a wheelchair. And so she's going to be joining us, and my goal is in 2 years that Fern would be able to access our playground in her wheelchair and be able to roll up next to any able-bodied student and be able to play side by side with some of the different things that we have to offer and some of the new things that we're adding. So part of that goal is changing out from bark to a surface that is wheelchair friendly. And I'm currently pursuing some grant options for that and looking for support in making sure that we have things for everyone to play with. And then building a community garden land lab. That is something that I have tried to do in every school I've worked in as a kindergarten teacher, assistant principal to currently at Oak Grove. So that's something that I see the benefit not only to children in the school, but to the community and making it accessible to the community. And I already have a group of seniors, not seniors in high school, but senior citizens who want to be the garden guardians. I don't know, that's kind of hard to say, but we'll figure out a good name for them, who want to come and help keep that running and keep that going. So we haven't even broken ground, but they're excited about it. I'll just share with you some quotes from our staff. And of course, quotes from our students. What our students have to say. Of course, there had to be one in there. Recess is the best, right? But we do have a great library, amazing, and we do have teachers that care. If you're having a hard time, they will help you. I know, because they do for me. Thanks for taking time to listen a little bit more about what's happening at Oak Grove. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hold on, I bet you we got a question or two. Anyone? I have one if no one else does.
I was just gonna say, I attended the Pirates of Grammar Island, and my niece was the head of it. Sophia was singing, so it was a great. That was a lot of fun, and I took notes. I was like, oh, that's how you're supposed to use that. So that's good.
Hey, I seriously learned a few things
right?
myself.
Yeah,
I
so-
know, it was good.
It was a great presentation. Thank you.
Brad?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I do. First off, great job, great presentation.
Thank you.
It's obviously, it's got to be nice to work with the staff that obviously have your back and you all can enjoy one another. That's huge. And that makes work and success so much more enriching. What do you attribute to your great attendance rate? I mean, how is that? Okay.
Yeah.
The staff?
Yeah, I think that when you have relationships with the students, they want to be there. There is Rita Pearson was an amazing educator, and she said, kids won't learn from people they don't like, and so the opposite is true, right? They're going to learn from people that they like, and they love their teachers, and so We offer so much of a positive environment that I think, they come for the fun incentives. We do all kinds of fun things. We had not a black light party, it was like a glow stick, dance party. There's just always just little things that might seem little to us that mean everything to them.
That's amazing, and that's something I know, Superintendent Gardner, that we're kind of focused on a little bit. It's obviously if you can't get them to school, you can't get them taught, and they don't learn, right? And so, wow, great job to you and your team back there on getting them to school, right? I mean, that's fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So to the issue of mental health concerns, are you finding that that's improving, getting worse, or is it flat, staying about the same?
Well, I don't have a lot to compare to.
Just your gut.
Just
We just came out of
from-
COVID.
I feel like from last year to this year at our particular site, that we're seeing more cases of students who need something that we maybe are not equipped to offer.
Okay. It's a problem everywhere. Obviously, the demand went way up as we locked people down and then came out of COVID, and I don't think there's a quick fix to it. It would be interesting to take a look at somewhere some school district is engaged in a different way or is doing something internally to help with that, because we can't ignore it, where there's no quick fix around the corner. So we need to look at that. And then the other, to the issue of the playground and getting, I guess what I would describe as an ADA adequate facility. Didn't we just build that school, and wouldn't the playground have been built to specs?
I can actually speak to that,
Okay.
because an ADA compliant playground is actually, so we are compliant, but the ADA requirements don't actually make it accessible to all students. So we're not the ones who are, we did what we were given, right? ADA compliant. It's the actual requirements that need to be updated. So that's where the disconnect happened, yeah.
So an ADA compliant playground does not make accommodation for kids in wheelchairs.
The ADA portion of it that you have to be compliant is literally that there is I want to say it's 4 or 5 feet of a concrete kind of slab that goes into the playground, which all of our playgrounds are ADA compliant, but none of them enable students in wheelchairs to be able to access the play area.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Great job. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is school report for South Albany. Andy.
I thought that was for me. I got a little excited, and then when it happened to be for
See you afterwards.
folks. Thank you. Appreciate it. I've known for a long time it's not really fair to follow an elementary school, so we need to reverse the order next time, but if we could. But thank you for having us tonight. I have a few colleagues here that might join me at the end, so if you ask any tough questions, they're here to answer, because we know you got to surround yourself with smart people. So they're here, and I'll introduce them at the end. But thank you, Chair Morris and Superintendent Gardner and members of the board for having us here tonight. We appreciate being able to share some cool stuff about South Albany High School and a little bit about our challenges. I think we always have to be transparent on what we're doing really well and the things we're working on. So first slide is just the acronym they took on years ago, and that was Take Flight, and that is family, learning, inclusion, growth, hope, and transformation. And it's part of a mission and a bigger picture that started maybe 4 years ago with the staff, and they kind of united around this, and it became part of their vision and way they looked at structuring some systems. And at the bottom is our statement that we'd like every student will graduate college and career ready with a plan for the future. And I think that that's one thing that South Albany has done really well, is I think that we have a good eye on career and college readiness. And trying to balance both of those for our students. So this is, oh, I got a clicker too. Isn't this cool? I left my thing right there. This is a little bit, I don't need to read it all, but this is kind of characteristics that the values we try to live by. And family is really important at South Albany, and it's really been one of the biggest things I think that COVID hurt us in, is that many of the structures at South Albany around family and being apart certainly took its toll on South Albany in many ways, because our systems were really structured on being there, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But learning and inclusion, growth, hope, transformation, and those are things we talk about all the time at our school. And those are a foundation of our everyday living at South Albany. This is kind of a little bit, just some quick facts, kind of our demographics. 60% white, 30 Latino, and you can read most of that. We are 47% free and reduced lunch. That's probably not accurate. I assume we're a little bit higher than that. But also we are 100% served free and reduced lunch. So our lunches for our students and breakfasts are all free. So we do qualify there. And you see the population of a lot of our focus with Latino students. And I think I can show you some really cool data on how they're performing, because obviously it's a big part of our school culture. And so I'll take a look at that in a bit. This is a little bit about our journey. This was pre-pandemic, and I think a great structure was sent by Principal Belleville that they got to a graduation rate of 89%, which I don't know if it's the highest in history, but I would say it's really close to that. And then we had a 5-year completer, 93%. It gives you a little bit of the state report card. And then we want to show the impact, a little bit of what I talked about of family and students not being there with us in person. We hit I clicked too fast and too quick. 82% was the pandemic part of the state report card, right in the middle of it. So we dropped a bit. Ironically, our 5-year completer stayed the same, but the interesting piece of the data is our college going actually went up 5% and the states went down 5%. I can't really give you the exacts of why that happened, but we stayed pretty consistent, except for our on-time graduation rate that dropped a little bit from 89 to 82. So that's one thing we worked really hard at once we got our students back engaged, and that was a challenge for us. And so we ended up back, this is our preliminary data. I did finagle, I think it's 85.78%. I rounded up to 86%, but that is our preliminary data, the state report card, the numbers that would look like. So we have a 93% Latino Hispanic on-time graduation rate. And then if you notice the CTE, 90%, those are students that took at least one CTE course, and 96% are students that got 2 or more credits in a strand of CTE, which I think is pretty impressive to show if you can get them in CTE courses and complete strands, that has a big impact on your graduation rate. So that's big proud, and we're really proud of the 93%. We don't know where we rank in the state yet with that, but I'm gonna guess it's close to the top. And so that's some proud work. And it's also interesting that our Latino grad rate is much higher than our overall on-time grad rate of the school. And I don't believe you'll see that in many schools. So that is a pretty cool thing. Our approach, and I know many of you know, we're an AVID school, and so a lot of our lens is through the AVID systems. And so AVID is just advancement via individual determination. And so we look at our instruction, our systems that we implement, our leadership, and our culture, all through this lens of AVID. And schools can develop many lenses or structures or frameworks in which they want to kind of develop their engagement on learning and how their culture will be and how their systems will be. AVID was just something that Principal Belleville took that I think he used as his framework to deliver these systems in a more structured way for South Albany High School, and it had a huge impact. The numbers they started with to get to 89% was a pretty incredible impact, and a lot of it's due to this framework and the approach through AVID. And I'll share a little bit more as we get going. So to give you a bigger picture, this isn't everything, but this is kind of what we mean by the umbrella, that we took AVID and we just tried to structure our systems underneath it so that each one is moving up and answering to the overall structure. So it gives you a little more effectiveness in what you're looking at. And in the bottom are just different groups and things under each of the four main, we call operations of our school. Probably the newest one is we started a really cool administrative advisory team. We were really struggling with moving forward, getting out of kind of this, my job's, it's tough, I'm tired, things are rough, we're kind of stuck in this trend, and we took a group and we said we want 10 positive people that all they're going to do is look at solutions and help us as administrators make better decisions to move our staff forward. And so this group, we've had 3 or 4 meetings. It's been amazing. They've started to engage and run meetings with staff. And so it's a way for us to really give staff some voice in the process, but we really put a twist that it needs to be a positive voice for us because we need to move forward with what we can control and make sure that we all know it's hard. And so we really needed that push. And it's been wonderful to have a great group of people. But it's been a nice system change for us. And we always have challenges, and I would say at South Albany, the biggest challenge is we always end our grad rate, we do fairly well, and we're always above the state average, and I think that we made progress back. Our blemishes, our freshmen on track, numbers are always lower than they should be or lower than we want them to be. So we're at 69%. On the state report card, the previous, and that's 12% below what the state average would be, and pretty reflective that if you have 69% as freshmen, you have to work really hard to get back to 86 or 89. So our focus, which I'll speak about, is how do we attack that so that gap closes so that we don't have to paddle so hard when they're juniors and they're seniors. And so, but that's obviously a number that's been a big focus of ours, and it's probably one of the tougher things is that we're dealing with. And it's not just this year. COVID did not help, but this has been a systemic problem for a few years of freshmen on track there. So, and this is, you got the Build the Nest, but I got some great people here, and they started part of Build the Nest, we called it. And they got in a little nest. They didn't know that was happening, but they got put in a nest. But we took some folks and tried to do a little bit of the things that we did at AOS a little bit, which is student fails the first semester of algebra, why do we throw them back in there again and make them take a whole semester again, or can we put them in this class and do some proficiencies and fill some gaps? And so we're doing a pilot program in science, math, and English. And we're taking just pilot groups of freshmen, putting them in there after they've failed, and really tried to work with them, smaller class sizes, and tried to emulate a little bit of some of what we did at AOS to credit recover, to fill some gaps. It's a pilot, and it's far from being big enough to really make a huge effectiveness gain on the numbers. But if it works, then it's something that we can slowly build upon and put more effort into our master schedule to make that happen. And they came up with a catchy name, but those are the teachers right now that are teaching the courses. And so hopefully it has some positive impact in the future. But again, pilot. We have a great program. We all know that interventions within the school are always the best, but sometimes when you're struggling to find places in your master schedule, we have an amazing program. It's called Red Hawks Rising, and it's after school, 2 days a week. Caitlin Sawyer's here. You'll get to meet her at the end. We have 65 to 80 kids come every Tuesday and Friday. We've had over 100 before. They get an hour and a half of support, snacks, prizes, a little music. Staff members, classified and certified, come and help the students. And it's relational. Eventually, we'll get back to where there's enrichment things tied to it as well. But right now, it's just getting staff to get in there and help academically. But the future, usually it's bridged with second session of being able to go and learn how to do computer stuff or cooking and do some club stuff activities like that. We're not quite there yet. That would be the future. But I could show you some numbers I think are fairly impressive. 65 to 80, but last year we had 33 sessions, 1,837 assignments turned in, and we had 2,685 people, 498 different students came to Red Hawks Rising last year, which I think is a pretty impressive number for being a school of 1,500 students. This year, we're on session 3 coming up, I think. We've done 2 sessions, but you can see the data. 376 assignments turned in, and they track that, students that are coming. Right now, we're really focusing on students with incompletes. So we have the incomplete list, and those students are coming there and getting help with incompletes to pass the classes in which they might have got 50% or above in that didn't pass that class. Caitlin could speak a lot more if you had great questions for her later, but it's been an amazing program, and it's really fun. The kids come and they have a pretty good time with it, and they get a lot of work done. They kind of looking forward. We just finished the great process of being accredited. It's an amazing journey to go on. It takes about a half a year. So we finished that, but next year we will be doing our revalidation to be an avid demonstration school, which is a fairly intense year-long process. Starts right now and will end in the spring with the big showcase that we get qualified or not qualified to be a demonstration school again. So that's hitting us here soon. We have some great stuff, College Now, and Bryce Bennett is here if you had questions, but he's made some great strides this spring with equity and adding College Now courses. We found out today we got a 10-credit course through Klamath, and I forget what it was, Bryce, but it's something coming up, AP Biology, and so he's working hard, and he thinks he's got 4 or 5 maybe on the docket to add to our school for next year with College Now credits, so that's exciting. And then we're going to continue to work on those systems we talked about. Our culture, we really need to keep working. And then the biggest, and I put focal point, is systems. I think we've got some systems that worked before COVID that we thought were going to work after COVID, and they're not. Kids aren't the same. Staff isn't the same. We're not in the same game that we were, and I think that we realize that we can't keep acting like time, just give it time, just give it time. I don't think that's going to be the answer for all of it. And so we're really starting to look harder at systems that we have that work and systems we have that don't work, and which ones do we need to tweak and which ones do we need to really throw out and build up again, that because it might have been great then and it just may not work now. So those are big focus. Our points of pride, I think we're always proud that we're an avid national demonstration school. We're the first one in Oregon, in one of 3 high schools. Really proud of our Latino and CTE graduation rates. I think they're amongst the highest in the state, and we're very proud about that. We have had the last couple of years since COVID has been out, we've had some really, really good success in our athletics and activities, from choir, 3rd in the state, to cross-country place in state, to teams. Many of our teams getting in the state playoffs, and I think that that just adds to the experience. We hosted a great, talked about percussion event. Wish I should have brought some pictures, but it's pretty crazy. The dress and the uniform and what they do is pretty amazing. So we have a lot of good things happening, I think, and it's nice to have that back. It really adds to your school. And I think one thing that we always have when you're a diverse population, I think you have, it makes you better because you have challenges that you need to address. And I think, and we're proud of that because it always makes us think, what can we do better? Because our school's changing very quickly in our population. And so I think it makes us a better school when we have that in us and the students challenge us. And Zaya would be one to tell you that we have some great students that challenge us to be better. And we appreciate that because we have a lot of work to do to be a great school that values and has equity systems in place that are really effective for everybody. I think we've done some good things, but we have a lot of work to do. So we value that a great deal. And you asked a point of pride. There's times when winter gets really tough and you might have a dance on a Saturday and 4 games at night, and then you wake up one morning and you get a letter. We hosted a unified basketball game, and I think Director Nyquist saw this, but from a Corvallis parent with some quotes that make you think maybe we're turning the corner again. And talking about our students, we had the greatest special school, the greatest students with the most special, compassionate hearts, and I think that that's where we're trying to get back to. And I think we had an event that it was amazing with dancing and bands and all kinds of fun stuff, and a lot of students came. So I think that's part of what we got to remember is that there's so many good things around us. We get caught up sometimes in the tough things, but we have some just amazing kids, and on this night it just showed how many amazing kids we have. There's way, way more amazing kids than tough kids, and that's what this night showed us all. So I was really appreciative to get that. Then we just have quotes. These are just a few from the kids, but a couple teachers, but just quotes about us. And that is really about it. And you only ask like one question for the elementaries or two. So does that mean only 1 or 2? Just kidding.
You might need some coffee.
I'm just joking. But and I didn't know if my group, I want to introduce you guys, my group that came, so come on up here. You're going to at least stand here and look pretty. So we got Lindsay Jansen here. She's our high school success coordinator, working really hard with the Build the Nest program. Lauren Birchfield is here. She's an avid coach for us and new to us this year and just done an amazing job. And I told you, smart people, really smart. And then we have Caitlin Sawyer. She's our academic counselor, and she's working a lot with those younger grades, trying to help us get some better systems for our freshmen and sophomores. And then, of course, we have Bryce Bennett. He's assistant principal. All of you probably dealt with him, but he's amazing, does our master schedule, and a lot of those tough things that the principal can't do, he does. So that's why we got him. So that is the crew. So if it's a real hard question, feel free to just pull any one of these folks up. But anyway, thank you very much for letting us.
Exactly what he told us too. It's a really difficult question. You guys have to take it.
Step up. But thank you, Edie. I appreciate it.
This is a tough one.
All right.
Is the parking lot in front of the pool there part of your school campus?
Parking lot in front of the pool.
Where-
Yeah, yes. It's kind of shared by a couple people, city, the pool, and us.
But it's part of your campus?
Yeah. Yes.
That's good, you're doing good. So I'm on
Not
your.
real fun to share it because we sometimes take the parking lots of the pool patrons that are older and maybe don't need to walk a long ways. So we work really hard at that, but yes.
I am a pool patron, and I'm older. And nobody's taken my parking spot this year, and so I was just gonna say, I was gonna proclaim that I'm on your campus 2 or 3 times a week.
I appreciate
Confirming that, and I am.
I appreciate that.
And your students are very well behaved, and you've got a lot of energy and positive momentum going on, and just hats off to all of you. The faculty, the students, the community, keep it going.
Thank you.
Brad. John, impressive graduation rate. Thank you. That's really good. I had a couple questions on the freshman pilot program. How many students are in that?
I'll let Lindsay answer the direct question.
Currently, we're serving about 45 freshmen across our 3 intervention classes. One of the difficulties we have is just figuring out placements for kids. And we had a lot of learnings this year about who needs to be in the program and how best to support their needs in the program.
And I'd be really curious to hear how that progresses, because I think it's a very positive step you're taking. So if you could give us some regular feedback on
Oh,
that.
you'll be hearing from me again.
Excellent, yeah, I want to, because I think this is something that's really good and maybe have to be a wider implementation, but.
And I'll add that I'm tracking a lot of data about the success of this program on my own, including both hard and soft measures between, like, for example, how does a kid feel about how they feel after they've learned a new skill? Like, do they feel they progressed in learning a new skill? Because really what we're seeing is with these kids, it's about building self-efficacy, their ability to do the thing on their own. And I really feel like if we can get this group of kids there, they'll be way more successful in high school overall.
Okay. In the after-school program, you've got 65 to 80 students doing that twice a week. Is there any thought of expanding that or trying to, because it seems to me like your graduation rate, you're obviously doing something right. Yeah. So is there a need to do more of that, or do you feel like that's the right amount? Do you need more resources to accomplish that? How does that?
I can talk a little bit, and if Caitlin wants to answer. I think right now, a couple days a week, with the amount of help we can get, teachers it's pretty hard to get them out more than 2 nights a week to do that. I think as we get through this, we certainly would love to add a little bit to that in the enrichment as well. So, but I think we're a little bit away from being able to get teachers to come out any more than a couple times a week. We have to pull a little teeth even paying them right now to, come on, I know you're tired. So, but yeah, it would be nice. And then to add the enrichment component again would be a nice component. But it could expand, absolutely, because the kids come. And, you know, some of it is a social thing, too. They study, but it gives them a place to go after school, especially if you're not an athlete. So some of that has drawn them there, and that's a nice benefit to that as well. But and so far, I think we've had the ability to fund and kind of keep it going. If it gets bigger, it might be a need. But right now, we feel like we're pretty sustainable, and probably could add a day to it if we could get the people in the future.
Okay.
How'd I do?
A teacher espresso machine just to try to.
I think so. I know we bribe them, so they're yeah.
That's all.
First off, great presentation. Really appreciate the data. You know, getting the graduation rates you're getting are fantastic, and obviously a lot of hard work by all your staff, and that's great. One of the things that, you know, it seems like you're not the, you know, West is the same way. Freshmen come in and they have, you know, they fall behind, right? Part of that's just definition of, you know, being a freshman, right? You know, personal note, I would tell you, you know, one of the things I haven't really understood or necessarily been a fan of is how we do grading in the middle schools. You know, I'm hard pressed to believe that's not part of the change that these freshmen are dealing with when they show up. You know, they're used to, you know, not doing a test and getting a 50 on it, and then they come to high school, and if they don't do the test, they get a 0. You know, I mean, obviously it was a long time ago I was a freshman, but that would be hard to get used to if you were used to the fact that you were going to get half the grade on it. Your thoughts on whether or not that our system that we have in place in our middle school actually helps us or hurts us to help our kids be ready for graduation?
I think that's a Bryce question. No, I'm just kidding. I think I could share with you, I had a middle school kiddo years ago, so I can't share the personal. And back then, I don't think it was ABs. It was 1-2 standards. And at that point, he was smart enough that he got through the system pretty good by not doing much, and because he was really intelligent and he could do it. But now I know they use the grades, but with you're referring to as the 50% if they don't turn something in. I could tell you just from an experience of not talking about middle schools, but talking more about what we see in our freshmen, we do see a lack of organizational skills and a lack of ability to turn things in. I'd say that you see that with freshmen anyways, but
Sure.
Does it compound the problem? I mean, I suppose it could. we started planners again. I think starting to get some of our emails, but we start planners with everybody this year again, not so much with juniors and seniors, mandatory, but so we really went back to our site team that we just talked about, went back to our lack of organization and lack of ability to get work out of freshmen and sophomores, to be honest with you. So a bunch of our work we restarted over semester because we are struggling with getting things in and organization from that group. Could I directly correlate it to that? I don't think I could, as not a scientist to be able to do that. But
Sure.
But we are dealing. That's a big issue that we're dealing with, and I haven't been at South for most of my years been COVID, and so I can't really give you a long term of what that looked like. I don't know if Bryce could, or if he even wants to say anything, but
So I've been at South Albany for 20 years, so I've really kind of been through the gamut of seeing how things have transitioned. And I was actually on the committee when Superintendent Golden was here and talking about discussing the changes with the grading system for the middle school from the proficiency model, going straight from the proficiency model, doing kind of a blend of adding in some grades as the letter grades as well. I also have 2 students that currently are at South Albany High School that are both of my boys, who are a product of that model, both, as John spoke to, with very intelligent, so they were able to do very well in middle school, and then they showed up at high school and realized, I don't turn in any homework, so I'm not being successful. And so I feel like the biggest part is just that educational piece as far as what that transition looks like. And that's part of what we've stepped up at the high school level, where we've tried to introduce some in our flight or advisory, as far as a big part of the school year, beginning of the school year, is that freshman transition. And one of the pieces that John didn't talk about is we've got a freshman transition program for some of our highest at-risk students. So we take 50 students during the summer. We call it our freshman flight program. And they're basically taught what is a GPA, how do you get organized, how do you do these things, and they earn half a credit. So they actually show up to South Albany High School half a credit ahead of their other freshman peers. So they've got that kind of leg up in front of that situation. But really, I can tell you, even from day one when I was at South Albany as a counselor 20 years ago, the transition from 8th grade to freshman year is a lot. I do think that when we went to the 1-2 grading, the standard-based grading, it was even a lot more confusing. Now that we're back to the letter grading with the proficiency model behind it, and I think we're molding towards some of that proficiency-based as well. Our Build the Nest program is very much proficiency because we want these students to learn these skills, so in order to be successful in their next math class. So it's really finding that marriage, but I'd really think that there's some work that we can do with the middle schools as well to help with that transition piece. We have an 8th grade visit day where they come and we do the transitions with that, but it needs to be more than just a couple flight lessons and just the freshman visitation.
Sure. Hey, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. One other thing, just more of a comment than anything else, it sounds like there's been some changes, but I've had some parents last semester talk to me about how they were having issues with their kids coming to school late and being tardy a lot, and they were not necessarily that pleased with the repercussions that were happening there on their part. But I guess that's changed a little bit. So thank you for that. I think all humans are if there's not consequences, we do certain things, and if there's consequences, we do other things, right? And that's just human nature. So thank you for all your work. The Avid and the notebooks, and you guys are going way far and beyond what we for the success of our children, and that's very admirable. So I applaud you all.
Applause would be a nice touch now.
Mr. Chair, I have one thing for John, actually.
Okay, Eric, sorry.
No, it's fine. I appreciate that you recognize all students. I appreciate your courtesy. I see you around town all the time. But it's important to recognize students for whom they are. And, Brent started that work. Nate kept that work going, and you've done a great job. I really appreciate that you're recognizing Latino students as Latinos. I hear reports every board meeting about what's going on at your school. And we ask why those graduation rates are so high. is you're recognizing students for whom they are. Everybody wants to be recognized for who they are, not just a student. So I really appreciate your work. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. You good?
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Everyone.
Okay.
J3.
Mr. Chairman. Yes. Your crystal ball on how much time we have left this evening, if it's more than 30 minutes, I'm holding out for a 5-minute recess right now.
I think we have more than 30 minutes. Let's
Mr. Chairman, I'd move for a 5-minute recess.
minute recess. We got quite a bit more left on the agenda, so let's go ahead and get started again. We'll bang back in session, call to order. Next is J, consent agenda. As we discussed earlier, number 1 and number 2 are tabled, and so we'll go on to number 3 with contract renewal extension, and Mr. Gardner.
Yes, you guys in executive session were shown the list of administrative and certified employees up for consideration for renewal. That list will be published tomorrow upon your action tonight.
I move to approve the contract renewals extensions as presented in executive session.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Before you go there, I will vote in favor of the motion. Want to be clear on the record that I was not in the executive session today.
Okay.
Go ahead and call the vote.
Okay, here goes vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, on to number 4.
I move to approve minutes, regular board meeting, January 23rd, 23 as presented.
I second that motion.
All in favor? Aye. On to number 5.
I move to approve minutes, regular board meeting on February 13th, 2023 as presented.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, next up is old business. Policy Board, GBL, Personal Records, Superintendent Gardner.
These are second readings and will take effect. Again, personnel records. There was a couple of changes to conform with current law. And I think this one was one of the ones that had been caught up in your policy rewrite, something that was updated. And you can see the changes there. It would take a motion.
Yeah, I move to approve board policy GBL, personal records as presented.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, old business number 2, GCPA, layoff recall licensed staff. Superintendent Gardner?
Yes, we talked about this at the last meeting. You will recall that there are now not just seniority to consider and certification. Obviously, programs can define that as well, which programs we need teachers in. But cultural or linguistic expertise shall be considered when implementing a reduction in staff, and that is a reflection of state law.
I move to approve board policy GCPA, layoff recall of licensed staff as presented.
Second the motion.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, K, old business number 3, board policy JEC admissions. Superintendent Gardner?
Yep, again, admissions. There we go. When a student in foster care changes schools, we must enroll them on the first day. I think we discussed this at the first reading. That's an immediate enrollment requirement. And that is the change to this policy.
I move to approve board policy JEC admissions as presented.
Second the motion.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, K, old business, board policy JHFE/GBN AB, reporting of suspected abuse of a child, reporting requirements. Superintendent Gardner?
Expands the requirement for reporting of suspected abuse of a child. It is expanding the definition of person. Any person, any district employee who has reasonable cause to believe that any person with whom the employee is in contact has abused a child shall immediately report or cause a report to be made in the same manner to DHS or its designee. abuse of a child by district employees, contractors, agents, volunteers, or students is prohibited and will not be tolerated. So what this really does is expands it to, it is not just an adult or student, it is any person needs to be reported.
I move to approve Board Policy JHFE /GBNAB, reporting of suspected abuse of a child, reporting requirements as presented.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Old business, number 5, LBL-ESD Local Service Plan. Superintendent Gardner.
Yeah, this is an update. Interestingly, this was not given to you in detail when Superintendent Everest did come over to visit us that day. This has been built by all the concurrent districts and is here for your review and approval.
I have one question for you before we approve. At one point, didn't the ESDs kind of help us with attendance? And having
Like at some point recently or prior?
last few years? I know, maybe I have this history wrong, but I thought at one point they helped us because they had some truancy people that would help us make the contacts and get kids to school.
Everyday Matters is a program that has been rolled out through the support arms in some ESDs. I have seen those posters here. I am not directly aware that that is a service we are providing in this district.
Okay.
But we can look at that.
Okay, I believe, and I could have the history wrong, but I think in the past, we've had them help us with that a little more than they do.
Okay.
So I'm good to move on, but I would like to hear more about that.
Just as a point of order, we do have a family liaison through the ESD that we purchase exactly for that service, for attendance. So it's a ESD employee, but we pay for that through Tier 2 funds through the ESD.
Okay.
I move to approve the LBL ESD Local Service Plan as presented.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, next is L, reports. Number 1 is graduation rates. Superintendent Gardner.
So behind you, and not on the one in front of you, are the graduation rates that were posted this January. And they are the graduation rates when we finished the school year last year in June 2022. The state then begins to compile those reports. We are given a chance to validate those numbers in November and into December. And then the final reporting of those graduation rates from last year comes out around the middle of January. And so this is a summary of those. I want to thank John Dilbone for his work compiling this. And we'll start going through the slides. So there are a couple of different measures that are used. The 4-year grad rate is the one you see in all of the magazine, newspaper, media articles once they're posted. And it's always a big deal. It's kind of the gold standard. These are the kids who, when they begin in the fall of their freshman year, are able to graduate in 4 academic years with a diploma. 5-year completer rates, those are kids who take 5 years to complete or who graduate with a GED. And these are, and John was speaking about the fact that that number rises a little bit. But you can see at the top there, AOS in 21, 22. And this was a little hard for me at first, but the most recent year is the left. And going back, you move to the right here. But you can see that the state had an 81.3 graduation rate. The district had an 83.61. Albany Options Academy had a 44.76. And I think I've mentioned before, that's superb for an alternative school. You will not see many over 20%. And then South Albany with the 85.76, West Albany with the 96. The completer rates, if you look down there, you will see that Albany Options has an 85.94. This is our alternative, an options academy that is really competing with the state average. That's significantly, that's really good. South Albany and West Albany with their completer rates. Let's go to the next slide.
Can you stay there real quick?
Can we, there we go.
So I'm confused. How does West Albany go down from 4 to 5 years?
That's a great question. We'll have to look at the data.
All right, thank you.
Let's go to the next slide. So again, this is four-year graduation rates. And if you look at it, you can see each school is a different color, again, moving right to left. And you can see there at the end on the left, the rates for the state, which is orange. District is blue. So in every year on this slide, you can see that the state average, the district has outperformed the state average, except for 2020-21 by just a little bit. AOS, South Albany, West Albany. And they compile for a really good district graduation rate. Questions about the 4-year? Let's go to the 5-year.
I have questions.
Okay.
So, and I may have just read the headline and the story, I may not have gotten all of it, but weren't we waiving, as a state, didn't we waive requirements and almost anybody who showed up got to graduate? Was it this last year or the year before? Or both?
So 2 or 3
Or
years.
do I have it wrong?
Well, so that's complex. The state standards have always been in effect, and kids in high school have one test on the state standards through the Common Core State Assessment, right, in reading, math. And kids, and science, they have a test. The kids who did not demonstrate proficiency on those standards through that test then were given another way to demonstrate their proficiency, which were the proficiency standards, and the state waived those. However, the standards in the classes were also related to the Common Core. And so rather than, if the kid can pass the class and get the credit, then why did we make them at the same time do a proficiency demonstration if they were passing the class and demonstrating proficiency? And so those were curtailed at the beginning of the pandemic.
The back end of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, what was the answer?
So the answer is the proficiency demonstration was not done, but the students still had to pass classes in which those same skills were required to get a passing grade.
So, okay,
Okay?
I got it. I can't repeat it and explain it, but I understand what you just told me.
It was quite the issue in the media that all of a sudden we weren't, asking kids to do anything. And yet, if you went and experienced a day in the life of a high school student, they were being asked to, do stuff that would.
They were being asked to, wait, I'm trying to explain it. they were being asked to go to class and pass the class in the area in which the expertise is required when they normally would have been required to take a test.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another way of looking at it here, you can see the graduation cohort graduation rates from 2015 to 2022. Now you're looking at state on the left, and you see that the state has made advances over the last 3/4 of a decade. In the district, again, you can see some pretty high marks with the abrupt drop in the one. And then AOS, some of the same things. And West and South, you can see that they're generally performing above state average. Next slide, please. These are the 5-year completer rates. And I think this is something that is kind of hidden at times because a lot of times the media focuses on the 4-year grad rate. But by the time students are 19 years old, the state has rounded up a great deal of them and got them through and moved them on towards successful outcomes. And in the aggregate, I think that we have made some moves across the board, and you can see it here. Let's go to the next slide. Same thing, completers over 5 years. West Albany has bounced around above 90%, 95%. And South has also had some great numbers. AOS has continued to be exceptional for an alternative school. And then finally, this is the correction that the district, the numbers that were reported, there was a step missed in the confirmation process when we were able to validate and check the state's records against ours. And you can see that the true numbers versus the numbers reported show some differences there. And of course, there was focus on how it happened, and I can assure you that we'll be accurate as we move forward. Okay, is that the last slide? Any questions?
We have another slide in our.
Let's go to the
online.
next slide.
Is original a word I don't know, or is that a typo?
I'm guessing typo.
I think that's close to original.
I think that's what it's intended to be.
Do we have another slide? Okay. Okay. Any questions on that?
I'm doing mine.
Okay. Thank you, Superintendent Gardner. Okay. Next is M, Bond Business Reports, Monthly Bond Report. Mr. Bolin and Mr. Hamilton.
Good evening, Board and Superintendent. Just wanted to walk through the January and a month report for capital projects. We had South Shore Elementary School continuing with construction. It was dried in, and it's a big milestone for a new building. And then also, we had 2 projects bidding. That would be West Albany High School baseball netting near the tennis courts south of the campus, as well as the CFU roofing project for South Albany High School. And then we had transportation facility wrapping up that project. It did achieve final certificate of occupancy and continuing with the commissioning of the heating and lighting systems on that building. Are there any questions?
I guess just generally, the projection of what's left on the list that we think we can achieve. Has that changed? Is that still the same?
Achieve.
CFU, the end of the bond fund, or?
The bond funding. There were projects left. South Albany roof was one of them, but there were others that I can't recall. And then the whole component of getting the HVAC systems out of storage and up and going where we had originally intended for them to go.
I can speak to that if you'd like me to. So I've used this end of the month report to really get my head kind of wrapped around some of the projects that are being done. So right now we have 6 active projects that I see going on. There's about $7 million listed in those projects that we actively have going on. Some of them are self-performed by us in the district, and some are being performed by HMK. I'm meeting with my staff in the next 2 weeks to see what's left with many of those projects, to wrap some of those up. And some of those are the mechanical ones that you're just speaking to. So what's left on to get those actuated. We have some projects of the unallocated funding. One was the South Albany roof that's coming in. South Shore Mechanical was a piece of the ones that are wrapping up that you were speaking to, and the Sunrise Elementary School Mechanical as well. Those are the 3 that we're having discussions about with the unallocated funding that's left. So I think that answers your question.
Well, I mean, the hard part is that there's nothing. So I have the South Albany roof, and we have those 3 HVAC units. And what else? Is there something in between there in the way of priority?
There was the NAMS roof, the mechanical 2 was on the list as well that I had received in my work the last couple of weeks. Those were and the CFU fire alarms was on that list too. I'm not sure if there's some that I'm missing there.
That's correct. So there are a number of CFU projects that have been prioritized, and the plan, as we've been working on the last couple of months, especially with Director Boland coming on board, to prioritize those and come up with a timeline for those projects. And because some of the cost estimates for those projects are fairly old, the plan is to design and bid those projects sequentially. And as the money comes in, the costs come in, we can see what's left to accomplish that work. The ones that are higher priority for the CFU ones are definitely getting the NAMS unit ventilators installed, which is self-performed, and then also the Sunrise mechanical units that'll get bid out. So that'll at least install the units that are owned by the district but are not installed yet. And so those have been prioritized.
Okay, I'll go from my point A to point B, and y'all figure out we're gonna get there, or tell me we can't, but I don't recommend that. So the roofs have got to get done because it was bond money, and if we don't get them done with these funds, it's a 10-year wait. Unless the roofs are really not in that bad of shape and they're not leaking and it's just a rotation type thing. I don't know which is true. I doubt it's just a rotation. My guess is these are roofs that are leaking at some level. And so those are a have to do in my view. So is the installation and utilization of the HVAC units that we've already bought that are already out of warranty. It's got to happen. When I hear bids are old and we got to go back out, we could be. I'm just very concerned about it.
So I think the units are Sunrise, North Albany, right? The ones that are out of, and so those are not a priority. I think in the CFU and then in the self-performed list, which together $4 million in the CFU and about $6 million in the self-performed. I think we're hoping to prioritize those. At the Lafayette meeting this fall at Lafayette School, we had set a priority that we would bid the roof, see what was left, bid Sunrise, and then I think we were going to move on. Included in that list of projects also is the solar, which we. It's there. So, but the two unused unit projects, the HVAC, are 2 and 3 after the roof.
And where's the solar?
South Shore.
Where is it in the priority list?
Skip, I'm confirming there is money for that in there.
So solar has multiple components. A portion of it is funded by South Shore project, which is ESSER, and has a timeline associated with it. So we're making sure that we at least get that infrastructure in place that has a timeline associated with it. And then there are other solar bond funds that we have not put a priority to yet.
I'll yield for now. I could talk
I
about
kind
this
of
for
a
another
follow-up.
hour.
So Skip, on those 3 units that we bought, I think one was installed at Liberty and 2 are ready to be installed somewhere else. Is that right? Or they're sitting there? Are those the ones we're talking about?
All of the large units have been installed except for Sunrise.
Okay, are those air handlers or air conditioners or HVAC with air conditioning, or what are they exactly?
They're rooftop air handlers.
So there's no refrigeration.
I'd have to look to see if there's air conditioning or not.
Okay, because I'm caution using the word HVAC because to me that means heating and air conditioning.
True.
And this is not what they are.
Right. I would have to confirm the AC part of HVAC. So, yeah.
Okay,
I'd need to
I
confirm that.
think we need to use our words carefully because I believe they're just air handlers.
Could be.
Is that correct? Okay, because we had talked, Andy and I had talked about that a little bit, Superintendent Gardner, and about Liberty and some of their cooling problems. And so that's why I want to be really clear that those are not
Right.
containing air conditioning.
Good point.
Any other questions?
No, I just want to confirm. I know, Roger, it would be comfortable to think that we would know exactly what we can do, but we have been taught over the last year that we should figure out what the bids are before what the next project is because of cost increases.
Well, the alternative to that would be to bid everything so we had everything in front of us so we could see what we could do and what we couldn't in real time versus the way we're going. I think we're maybe in a price flattening or maybe even a little reduction with the economy at this point in time, but I appreciate the way we're going here, but I would prefer to see it all in front of me.
Okay.
Noted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hamilton, Mr. Bolin. I think that's the questions we have for you.
Thank you.
New business, integrated guidance. Mr. Gardner.
Lisa, our Assistant Superintendent Harlan, will be presenting to you something I think she's put a lot of work on and prepared the integrated guidance application, which will be turned into the state at the end of March. And I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Superintendent Gardner, members of the board, and the public. This is an important presentation for the public to be able to get a view of what is in this application, for them to be able to give input and comment before it's submitted to the state. So a little bit about this process and how it's new. There are several state reports that are due from districts, both for state funds and for federal funds. And for years, districts have been asking for a streamlined process so that we don't have annual reports, 10, 11, 12, that the annual reports that we give and submit to the state can be streamlined. A lot of it is the same information that's required over and over. And districts have also requested the ability to leverage funds from different sources to work on the same goal. So That is what the state started to do, and it took them quite a bit of time and effort to do it, and that is what this integrated application is about. And so there are 6 specific programs that are included in this application. That's important to know because it doesn't include everything. So for example, our title programs are separate from this. But the programs it does include are our high school success. You'll hear that referred to as Measure 98 a lot. Our student investment account, SIA. The continuous improvement planning process that's required of districts, so the requirement that districts have a district improvement plan, that schools have school improvement plans annually. Our career and technical education, so those are Perkins funds. I'll talk a little bit about how that will be different for us in this district. Everyday Matters, that is through the ESD, and that's the attendance campaign. And then early indicator intervention systems. So the common elements of these programs that then we kind of blend together are all of them require authentic engagement processes with the community and with parents. They all require that the district make equity-based decisions, and they require you to answer questions around how you're doing that. So how are you elevating students who are part of groups that are either underserved or historically marginalized? There is a comprehensive needs assessment that was required for each one of these 6. So instead of doing that over and over and over again, it is super helpful to be able to do one comprehensive needs assessment and then take a look at how we can best address those needs. And they all also required this continuous improvement cycle. So those 6 programs have these 4 common goals. And it will look pretty familiar because you've seen those common goals as requirements as part of SIA. So the SIA plan that has been presented, those will look familiar. So there will be one common application, like Superintendent Gardner mentioned. That application will open in the month of March, and it must be submitted by March 31st. It will it requires community engagement, and there is much more of an emphasis on not only engaging and empowering, but elevating student voice, especially in certain focal groups, to the point where we will have required targets for specific focal groups, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. A little bit about the required planning process, and the goal is that there's a 4-year plan, that there are clear outcomes attached, and a 2-year budget that's proposed. So specifics, in addition to the application, which was in your board packet, it's 19 pages, there's a supplementary budget that's also attached. You have to have 5 pieces of community engagement evidence that is uploaded in this application. There must be a board-adopted equity lens. We do have board policy that's an equity lens, and that's policy JBB for us. You have to use the integrated planning budget template that shows how you're actually funding the priorities of these funds. Has to be posted to the website, and then we'll have to submit our board minutes for this meeting and the next one. So some of the community engagement activities and responses. We have a K-8 survey that is given to students, staff, and parents that is standard throughout the district. This is the 2nd year of the same survey, so we're able to kind of track longitudinal data. We had over 1,600 responses from grades 3-5, and over 1,200, almost 1,300 responses for grades 6 through 8, and then accompanying staff and parent. For high school surveys, South gave a student survey this year. They had 1,074 responses. This is West's student survey from last year, and they had 773. And then we included input from specific parent and community advisory groups. So in addition to community input, there is a lot of data that's required in your needs assessment to take a look at. That includes, of course, all of the benchmark data, 3rd grade, 9th grade on-track graduation, but it also includes things like our DESA data, which is the social emotional health screening that we do K-8, behavior data, and then other survey data. Some of the strengths of those surveys and highlights that I wanted to highlight, 90% of our elementary students in grades 3 through 5 report having friends at school. That's really important because if kids feel like they have a place to belong, it's one of the things that we measure. 86% of those students report they'd know what to do if they saw someone being bullied. Out of 6 through 8, students, 80% reporting that staff treat students respectfully, and at least 71% say that at least one adult at school knows them well. I know it may not seem for grades 3 through 5, why is that an important measurement? But these are all measurements for kids around wanting to come to school, feeling like you belong at school, and feeling like school is a place you can be successful. Highlights from the high school, the parent survey at West from last year, 73% of those parents reported their child felt safe at school. Our 4-year graduation rates at both of the high schools are back on the rise after a previous dip, and high school students were surveyed at all high schools last year, which is helpful. Some of the needs that we saw, 9th grade on track has declined steadily in the past 8 years. There is a data dashboard for every district in Oregon, and actually you can Google it, the Oregon Schools Data Dashboard. You can pull up any district and it will give you longitudinal data from about 2014 until the present for all of these and actually more markers, and that's one of them. Graduation rates have been either stagnant, so within percentages, or declined, specifically for specific student groups. Grade 3 reading scores have remained relatively stagnant. Our participation and access to advanced courses show quite a discrepancy between student groups. So you heard Principal Hunter talk about participation in CTE and CTE coursework. When we break down the students who participate in those, there's quite a discrepancy between student groups. And so that's something we should take a look at, because we know students who participate in CTE fare better than students who don't. And we also have a need for a standardized student survey district-wide with data that can be disaggregated by student group, so that we can see if it is 70% of all students who are performing in a certain way or who feel a certain way, but of specific groups, if it's students with disabilities, 80% of them are not, that tells a story of something that we need to address. So we need to have data that we can drill down in a standardized way, and we currently do not. So our plan, these priorities should look familiar to you because they're the 3 priorities that come from the strategic plan, and those are the same 3 priorities for this plan. There's a link, and on that link on our district website under the district tab and long-term planning will be the integrated guidance that is posted to the web. Our intended outcomes, so we have specific goals for the next 2 years for those major areas. It's important to note that what's called longitudinal growth targets will be required of every district in these 4 areas and a 5th one, which is attendance. And those goals will be developed in partnership with ODE and will be voted on by the end of June. And so we tried to get a jump on it to see what those might be like, but it's important for the board to know that they'll see longitudinal growth targets that will come back before them, and that those will be required as part of this plan. There also will be specific goals for specific student groups whose outcomes are discrepant from all students. Some key strategies, so to be able to identify disparities, to be able to address those, to reduce that. A common set of proven instructional strategies with specific scaffolds and frequent feedback, so staff getting on the same page about what those scaffolds are, how they're delivered, and how we give frequent feedback to students. And then really learning that's focused on some critical areas that will propel students towards greater outcomes. So some of our key investments, so these are key things that we are spending this money on. Mental health partnerships, certainly, counselors, social workers, CTE courses and teachers. So the high school success money, most of it goes towards funding specific sections, specific teachers at the high schools and at the 8th grade level. That's a requirement of those funds. They can only be used for high school and only a certain percentage of 8th grade. Interventionist behavior support, These are the funds that we use to eliminate the sports fee. So it used to be, I think, $150 for a student to be able to participate in sports, and we've eliminated that in the past few years to try and get students connected, and so that cost isn't a barrier. Middle school extracurricular programming, and then additional investments to support the strategic plan. Oh. Again, didn't know, that was very fancy. So our performance growth targets will be co-created, and they will come back, and that will complete the final agreement. They will have to include these 5 common metrics, and you saw some preliminary ones. They, of course, have said you can have more growth targets if you want, and you can use local metrics like benchmark data. My recommendation would be to stick to the 5 because 5 is quite a bit to be able to focus on. So what happens next in this? So there is this presentation, and it's available to the public so that they can review it and give input. There will at first be a review, so ODE will review it, and then it will go through a peer review process, and that's what the QUALP is. So there will be peer review panels that will review each district's application and their budget, and it will be required that we basically pass those 2 reviews in order to have a completed and signed grant application for these funds. That was a lot of information very quickly. In your board packet, I know that you have the complete application. Like I said, it's 19 pages, and the questions that you see there are required to access the grant funds. Then you'll also see a 2-year budget that basically at the very top shows you how much is budgeted. So for example, the EIIS, the Early Intervention System, that's a grant that's $27,000, right? Each year. And so not a big dollar amount. The CTE Perkins, you'll see at the top, it says 0. And so you may wonder, do we really get $0 for that? No, but we actually use kind of a consortium, and that is managed by Dale Moon, who's at LBCC, who does all of the regional Perkins dollars for the region. And so that's managed there, which is why you don't see those dollars in our plan or in the budget, because that's done through a different mechanism. The high school success dollars, you certainly do. You'll see those, and then the SIA are the 2 biggest funds that are part of this plan.
I have questions. Can you go back 1 slide?
Sure.
So under the what happens next, the green bar that is the application window is into April there.
Yep, so the application window is open March 1st through March 31st.
So, but that's not what it reflects.
It is a hard date, though.
Okay, all right.
You mean in
okay.
terms of the
No,
application
I'm just
itself?
looking at the flow, and
Yeah. Without numbers, it might be hard to tell if that's the beginning of April or the middle,
right.
but certainly it's March 1st through the 31st.
Okay, so then the next question I have is that it says Oregon Department of Education at the bottom of this.
Yes.
So are all of these their slides, or is some of this internally our slides? Because
Great question. So ODE, in partnership with the ESD, has a slide deck that they say, here are the component parts that you must present as part of the plan, and then you take it and put your own information. This slide is certainly just from them. There isn't anything that is that has been changed. That is certainly the process.
okay, so in round numbers, total dollars, what are we talking about? Does this include the gross receipts tax money?
The corporate activity tax, that is what funds SIA, the student investment account, completely. So for the first year, for high school, and like I said, it's in your board packet, but off the top of my head, the SIA for year 1 is $7 million. For year 2, it's $7.3 million. And the high school success is about 2.2 and 2.6. So that's what you're looking, $9 million and 9+ the second year. And that's pretty conservative because we anticipate that SIA, the corporate activity tax, originally for next year would be greater than $7 million.
So we are in advance of doing a budget, in advance of, I think, being able to measure how we've done with these funds. We are making a 20-year commitment into the future of what we'll do, and we're doing it by the end of next month.
I think that's a great point. Do you want to go?
Well, I don't know that I don't know that it's a 20-year commitment, and I'm not sure.
No, it's a 2-year commitment.
Oh, I
but
thought you
it's-
said 20. I was
But
like
it's
that.
$20 million.
Oh, over the course of 2 years? Yes, because these are funds that have requirements attached to them. So these aren't funds that, for instance, we could say, we would like to use it for capital improvements, or we would like to use it for general fund staff, or we would like to use it. Those funds wouldn't be available for that. And so as a requirement to access these grant funds, these things are required.
Well, with all due respect, we had a presentation earlier, I think it was in the fall, and it was an update on how we were doing with these funds, and I got a like it, a love it, a don't like it, you could be audited. And I couldn't reconcile that with the statute or with ODE administrative rules. And we're in a situation, and you heard it from Principal Hunter, that whatever we were doing, we've got to substantially adjust. And so I just have a lot of questions, and I don't.
I believe that there is flexibility. I think one of the things that this process, the process either masters you or you take control of it. And you could see that the 3 strategic plan priorities are in the report, and which allows some flexibility there to make adjustments if needed. And that is allowable.
I mean, the glaring example is mental health, and what we've been doing, what's worked, what hasn't, what might we be looking at in the way of trying to replicate somebody else that's doing things successfully, and being pinned down to doing what we've done for the last 2 years. I don't know. And so one of the other questions I have is the survey work. I love that we're doing survey work, and I love that, but who's doing the survey work, and do they have who's creating the survey work, and do we know that it's statistically valid? Because getting numbers and getting survey work that's not valid can be more dangerous than not having any numbers at all.
Yeah, it's a great point, which is why on the slide for needs, you saw that was one of the needs. So currently K-8, it is a standard survey. It's a nationally normed survey, and it's an instrument that's been used repeatedly. The high school survey is one that the high schools came up with, and that looks slightly different at each of the high schools. The wording of the questions look slightly different, and so that's why you saw for a need, we need a standard survey so that we can measure, for example, a question that is commonly measured are, do students feel safe at school? You would want to measure that K-12 and over the course of years to see what does that look like. But we currently do not have a district standard K-12 survey for students, staff, or parents.
Oh, so what are we going to do about that?
That's why it was on
We're
the
in
need
development.
slide, yeah.
And we have purchased Qualtrics, which is a survey tool. We are working on it, getting that done.
Okay. It would seem to me that, and maybe you all are already doing it, and we've not been involved in it, and that's why we're getting it here tonight, but some pretty significant analysis as to what's working and what's not, and where we can change things. Where do we, what's the analysis of that, and how do we fit into that process? Because ultimately, we, along with the budget committee, have to approve a budget that works for everybody.
I can speak to the routine process in terms of where you fit in that. I'll defer to Superintendent Gardner, but in the curriculum department, every 6 to 8 weeks, we have a routine that we call, it's not very sophisticated, the name, HASD, how are schools doing? And so this is a process where school level directors, department directors get together to examine school data, school by school, and regular data that we can measure over time. And those data points are things like grade distribution, on track, DESA data, behavior data, referral suspensions, in school, out of school, special education referral rates, attendance, economically disadvantaged, what those percentages are. And we take a look not only by level to determine, is this a problem that's happening across the system that needs to be addressed? Is this a system that's happening across a level? Or is this a specific need of the school? And the whole point of that routine, it is similar to what schools do. It's just elevated at the district level. But the whole point is to be able to inform us to decide, how do people need support differently? And great examples of that were 3 years ago when we looked at behavior data, and we could identify 3 schools at the time, elementary schools, that were in need of support, and we could get support to them, either in terms of having safe and civil schools come to support, to start a program there, or to say, oh, they need some behavior support, because at the time we didn't have deans at the elementary level. But that routine is something, that continuous improvement process is something that we do every 6 to 8 weeks with disaggregated data to do exactly what it is that you're talking about at the school level. I'll let Superintendent Gardner speak to where you fit into that process, but that's what we do internally.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. What are the areas? And I think when they were talking about, I think 2 slides back behind that, there were the 4 major areas. 9th grade, look at that, 3rd grade reading proficiency. We had talked about that being a little flat on the previous slide, or stagnant. We hadn't moved it too much. 9th grade on track. John said tonight, that's a place where we really need to go to work. We're down. Our regular attendance, I think that tonight, Oak Grove's was outstanding, but an exception. There's work to be done. And then the 4-year graduate. That is a pretty good summary of what we should be working on. And I think Ms. Harlan said about the DESA, emotional health. I mean, you know, we have the data that can help focus us on what we should do. But that's a pretty good summary, right? Teach young kids to read. I know we have a gap there. Mr. Boyd in the back, our secondary director, is spending a lot of time focusing this year on 9th grade on track, right? Because we've recognized that as something we need to go to work on. So those are the big measures, and hopefully we can see that we're moving forward next year.
Thank you. So we talked about the survey work with students. You also, there's, for lack of a better term, I'll call it outreach steps to the community. Are we using the same precise, statistically valid information gathering with the general public and parents as we are with students? Not that you can't replicate it because the general public doesn't go to school every day and they're not enrolled. But again, there are ways to do survey work that's statistically valid and ways that are not. I would ask that we do it in a way that's statistically valid, or at the very least, if we're not doing that, that we know it up front.
Well, so there's a value in feedback, and then there's some value, I suppose, in saying, oh, you know, nationally, here's how people feel about the grounds at their local high school, right? So it depends on the topic that we're going to engage on as well. And I think there's a broad array of things that we need to measure from our community annually, like their perception of our grounds, food service, right? There are just a lot of different things, the relative safety that they perceive their children have in school. So there's a lot of things that we can know just generally what they are. There's value, particularly in the first year, if there is some normative, you know, comparison quality. But if we continue with a consistent survey, then it will, the great comparison is whether we've improved from the year before, right? And so, but we can look for normed or statistically valid surveys that would compare out, but a lot of it is just, we want some information back.
The surveys that we use K-8 are statistically valid, and they're reliable in that regard, and they include parents and staff, but they don't include just the overall community.
The general public.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so is there an exercise we do that is the general public? Is there,
I believe there is.
should we be?
Yes.
Okay, good. I should stop, but I won't. So I guess I am concerned about the timeline of making a commitment around how we're going to spend $20 million over the next 2 years and doing that outside of the budget process. And it would seem that based on the timeline, that incorporating that in the budget process is not achievable.
So certainly, grants will be reflected in the budget, but they're separate from being part of the budget process, just like title grants are. I certainly hear your concern. I think it's a valid concern, and I don't think that that's something that we'll be able to delay to make part of our budget process to access the funds.
Well,
So I want to correct that. We can amend that, and there are allowable expenditures. If they support our strategic plan.
Budgets.
They can be allowed in there.
okay. I'm a little bit comfortable with that. The other option would be that we start our budget, we at least do a budget outlook hearing with the budget committee like in 3 weeks. That doesn't really make any sense to me either.
Budgets can be amended, certainly, and we have quarterly reports that we have to report to the state about how these funds are used. And so a good example, there were lots of folks who wanted to spend, we were one of them, money for staff, to hire certain staff, elementary counselors originally, but we couldn't find as many as we needed. And so you certainly can amend it, but you have to go through a process to do that, right? You have to say, why didn't you spend it in that way? What are you going to spend it on? And how does that fit within the plan goals? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your indulgence.
Any other questions on new business number 1?
I guess,
Go ahead.
Eric, microphone. I guess the questions are, and I really loved hearing earlier today that Memorial is doing Saturday school. And we started doing MTSS, we started doing QTEL, and every school is doing some form or amount of that. But we can continuously to see that our progress is stagnant or declining. In some places is increasing. And there is external things happening at schools with behavior and attendance that we haven't seen. But when are we going to put systems in place is your school isn't performing, if your third graders can't read or they can't write or they can't do math, when do we place more time at the end of the year? When do we place that your school doesn't perform, you're going to have to create a Saturday school, or you have to go an hour longer? We're asking people to learn the same amount they would always learn. But we're also asking them to learn 30% of last year and 30% of the year before that. So I would like to know where the systems are, because we're relying on MTSS and QTEL right now to increase our learning levels. But where are the systems that are in place? If you score here, one of my fraternities, they went down an academic level right now, and so they all have to attend, 80 students have to attend a class on doing your homework and the importance of doing it. That's a system that is in place. Where's our systems that we're gonna be using in these kinds of reports that's saying, hey, we're gonna do this if we're not achieving this goal?
So to be really clear, MTSS stands for multi-tiered systems of support. That is a system. And that's something that's used, that has been implemented and strengthened at the elementary level and has just begun at the middle school level, and we don't have it all at the high school level. And so I want to be really clear about that. That is the system that we use to tell, as soon as a student has a skill gap, if we can fill it sooner rather than later before the gap has grown, that is the best in terms of research method to be able to close and address gaps. We aren't there in terms of our implementation. A full MTSS system would include that approach to not only reading, but reading, math, social skills, and behavior. And so we aren't there at all with math, and we are getting there with behavior. For middle school, we've just started. I think this is the second year, and it's only the second year we've ever had reading interventions, and we don't have it in place at all at the high school. And so some of the things I think you're talking about is increasing instruction and increasing instructional time for students through programs like summer school or an extended school year or weekend enrichments to be able to increase basically instructional time for kids that need it.
I mean, this weekend, I got a handwritten letter from a graduating senior talking about Avid. It was a full-page letter, and it had one piece. There's one period at the very end. There's not a comma, a period, anything in an entire page letter. This is a graduating senior being proud of the Avid program. That educators, we just absorb that thought of, here's a graduating senior right now with no
Punctuation, yeah.
Punctuation, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Obviously, some work to do and some homework for the board members to read all that and look at it.
And this will come back
Yeah.
at the next
new
meeting.
business.
Yep. And as we get input, what you see very well could adjust and change, and that's the point of receiving input.
Nope, that makes sense. So we all have some work to do to look at this. Okay, new business number 2, interdistrict transfers 2023-24 school year. Mr. Gardner.
So we are, as part of the law that governs interdistrict transfers, we are required to make a decision and post the number of students we'll allow in as transfers at each grade. And this is the number, and you will notice that we did not put seniors on there. That has created some angst in the past. But K-11, as space allows, students, that number of students will be allowed in the transfer windows that are below. It's a key point. We generally want people within the district kind of having first dibs before students from outside the district do that. This does not stop students from moving into the district, and it does not allow us to not enroll students that are homeless.
Right.
Right. So it is a pro forma action to declare that each year.
Sure, and I could have this wrong, but I seem to remember last year that it also was tied to a little bit of how many people we had that wanted to go somewhere else and who came into here. I don't see that on here. Is that something that?
As space allows, it is true.
Oh, okay, so that's kind of how I understand. Okay. Any questions on that, gentlemen?
I move to approve interdistrict transfer information as presented.
It's new business, so I don't think we're doing it, right?
Oh, well, it said, all right. This action is requested at this meeting, but.
Yep.
It does?
Posted.
Oh, okay. Then I guess it's not right on here. Okay. I withdraw.
Okay. Number 3, board policy ACB, all students belong.
This is some updates to the policy. A broader definition there of the, and some examples of derogatory language and behavior. It's just an update to the policy by law. And this is first reading, is that correct, Chris?
Yep, all new business, so. Number 4, board policy GCB/GDBDB, return to work. Superintendent Gardner.
Okay, again, it's another policy which is changed just a little bit, and you can see that there. We may provide temporary unpaid leave as an accommodation, and superintendent or designee will do it. Very simple alteration.
Okay, thank you. New business, number 5, board policy IGBAF, special education, individualized education program, IEP. Superintendent Gardner.
Yeah, let me expand it a little bit to where I can see it. It does have new legal references in the policy. You can see that down there. There's an OAR that has been cited now.
Thank you. Number 6, budget committee calendar updated. Ms. Knopfziger.
Good evening. So I'm presenting the budget calendar that is revised. So we are asking to delay the budget process to allow us to get clarity from the legislature. And Roger, we do know what the different levels of revenue mean to us, but having a better idea of what we'll receive will help us with the budget process. And if I could, Roger, I would want to let you know, grants are definitely a part of the budget process. And if the board were to make decisions in any of the grants, SIA, we do have a pathway through ODE to amend those grants.
Thank you. No future agenda items, other business, just information only. So we're just listing it so people can look at it if they want, I guess. Administrative regulations, ACB, TAC AR, bias incident complaint procedure. Mr. Gardner?
Yeah, you can see that, and correct me, Javier, you have also looked over this and synced this. And this is just an AR, administrative regulation, around how we will take reporting on the any alleged incident, and it defines them within that. These are updates to the AR. And thank you, Javier, for your work on that.
Mr. Chair, under future agenda items, you and I spoke earlier about a transportation committee
Okay.
that could be created between board members, community involvement, and transportation staff, and looking to improve ways that the district can communicate and handle those operations. And I'll bring a plan to a future meeting.
Great. Sounds good. Thank you very much. Okay. P2, administrative regulation, GCDA/GDDA TAC AR, criminal records, checks, and fingerprinting. Superintendent Gardner.
Yeah, if you look at that, it is an AR that has some changes. The exceptions, I'm on page 2 there, the Oregon Department of Education, and then it says, determines the person, immediate previous employer. We've been caught in this a couple times where we have hired people who have worked for another school district where they have been fingerprinted. But if that were the case, then we would not face the requirement here. We could use the fact that they had been fingerprinted and were working in another district. So it's a streamlining rather than each district starting over.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on anything? Okay, we're at Q. Do I hear a motion?
I move that we adjourn the meeting. We're going to go all night. Right on.
Heck yeah.
All in favor of adjourning the meeting?
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll adjourn.